Monday, September 15th, 2025. And of course, a lot of things are going on in the world and around the world. And we'll be talking about those here on World Edition and seeing what folks have to say about a number of these issues. British politicians condemn Elon Musk comments at anti migrant rally. We will never surrender our flag, Sir Keir Starmer says. And definitely, London protest latest calls for Musk to face UK sanctions after discussing Tommy Robinson rally speech. And U.S. military officers pay surprise visit to Belarus to observe war games. So that is something going on as U.S. soldiers make a surprise appearance at the Russian war games. Russia and Belarus carry out military drills amid rising tensions. And definitely that is something that folks are talking about as well. Prime suspect in Madeleine McCann case turns down interview with British police. So Madeleine McCann suspect Christian Bruckner, set for release in Germany, refuses to talk to UK police, and Prime Madeleine McCann suspect refuses med interview before German prison release. So that is something that folks are talking about out of the uh, whole European area and everything like that. Romania, second NATO nation in a week to report a Russian drone in its airspace. Romania condemns irresponsible Moscow after Russian drone breaches its airspace. As sabotage in Europe mounts, so do calls to retaliate against Russia. Poland calls for NATO-backed no-fly zone over Ukraine. So that is something that folks are talking about in terms of other countries that Russian drones may be attacking as well. Trump says that Israel must be very careful with great ally Qatar following strike. So Qatar's emir says Israeli aggression blatant, treacherous, and cowardly. Arab ministers meet on response to Israeli attack in Qatar. The Arab Islamic Summit to warn Israeli attacks threatens normalization of ties, draft resolution shows. And melting glacier means an uncertain future for Europe's rivers. Like walking through time as glaciers retreat, new worlds are being created in their wake. Melted ice reveals skeletal remains of curious structures not seen in decades, and some folks are saying that and learning what's happening in that case. Israeli strikes high rises in Gaza City ahead of a cabinet meeting to discuss the risk of ground operation to hostages. And rising seas will threaten 1.5 million Australians by 2050. That's what Landmark Climate Report is warning. So Australia warns of cascading climate risk ahead of emission targets. So warning of climate breakdown and soaring heat waves, a wake-up call for Australia is what their prime minister is saying. So looks like there may be some notion of some rising seas there in the land down under. And Australia and Papua New Guinea to sign a defense pact as China's influence grows. Totally integrated Australia to join military force with Papua New Guinea. And Australia's Prime Minister Albanese arrives in that area, Papua New Guinea, ahead of the defense treaty signing. So Australia to upgrade defense ties with that part of the world as China's Pacific influence continues to grow. China hits back at Trump's 100% tariff threats. So definitely that's something that's going on. China accused the U.S. of bullying in push for tariffs over Russian oil purchases. So definitely that is something that is going on in the international news as well. And in Germany, Merce's CDU set to win in the NRW. AFD makes big gains. So far right AFD's vote triples in election in German bellwether state. German state elections, AFD make gains. The Greens fall behind in that particular race and all along those lines. Ukrainian drone strike sparks a fire at one of Russia's top oil refineries. So oil edges up after attacks on Russian energy facilities. Russia's Premisk port resumes oil loading after the drone attacks. And after fiery protests, Nepal's leaders are promising a brief caretaker term. So Nepal's Prime Minister Karki appoints minister after the deadly Gen Z protests. So after deadly protests, the new prime minister is urging calm, and he's to hand over power within 6 months. That's the interim prime minister in that part of the world. U.S., South Korea, and Japan opened joint air and naval exercises. So South Korea hosts U.S. and Japan for joint air and naval exercise Freedom Edge. So North Korea leader's sister warns against U.S. joint drills. So that is something that we're seeing as well as the U.S. holds drills with Asian allies drawing North Korea's rebuke. And after protests, the Generation Z sweeps Nepal clean. That's is from a couple of days ago. So young activists who toppled Nepal's government are now picking new leaders. More egalitarian, how Nepal's Gen Z used gaming app Discord to pick the prime minister. And I do know some folks, even some folks here on this network, that use Discord and all along those lines. And Le Pen turns the screw on Macron ahead of crunch budget talks. So while Macron thinks Locarno can save France from the abyss, France government has cut us before. How do we get here and what's next? And France's debt rating cut on fears of political instability. And the Pope is saying martyrs can unite Christians of different backgrounds. So the Pope honored 21st century martyrs, Christians killed by Islamic militants, mafias, and Amazon Rangers. So over 1,600 over 1,600 Christians were killed for their faith since 2000 is what a study said in Christian Today. And Pope Leo the 14th honors modern martyrs and said no one can silence their voice. And starvation and bombs in besieged Sudanese city as residents cry for help. Yale HRL said no safety or escape for civilians in North Darfur, and that was reported in Dabanga Radio TV online. The choice between starvation and death, Sudan's forgotten siege. So that's something that people are talking about as well. Let's see some of the things going on in the U.S., and then I'll see who's with me and what they want to talk about as well. But definitely lots going on. The U.S. and China hold second day of trade talks as TikTok deadline looms, and I understand that Trump says he'll speak to Xi on Friday, and there are hints out there that there might be a TikTok deal, and Trump suggests a TikTok deal has finally been reached with China. The U.S. has also said it will press ahead with TikTok ban if China doesn't drop tariff and tech demands. Kirk shooting suspect held leftist ideology. That's what the Utah governor is saying. The investigation into church killings continues. And Charlie Kirk's murder suspect is linked to crime scene evidence through DNA match, according to what the FBI director has said. So definitely that's something that people are talking about, and we'll find out if that is the case or not the case as the investigation continues. Charlie Kirk's alleged shooter is not cooperating with investigators, and the funeral for Charlie Kirk poses a major test to Secret Service. It's all hands on deck, but there's multiple decks. So LIV golf star Phil Mickelson slams disgusting rhetoric after Charlie Kirk's assassination. So I know there have been some others that have condemned some of the rhetoric as well. But definitely that's what's out there. And we'll see what people have to say about a number of these stories. Trump says foreign experts welcome after South Korea outrage over raid. South Korea probes human rights abuse in Allende raid. And Trump is saying foreign workers are welcome. And we'll see if folks agree or disagree with that statement. And in Vox.com, there's an article that says Charlie Kirk was more than a conservative activist. And folks are also asking, what is Turning Point USA? And definitely folks are asking how Charlie Kirk became a pioneering MAGA political organizer on campuses. And apparently he was credited with helping Republicans break through to young people. And I know some people might say that is the case. Other people may not. I was actually watching on the news, another news channel yesterday, and they were talking about how a lot of our young folks are okay with political discourse and silencing those that they disagree with. I think it was like 70% that it said it was okay to interrupt a political speech and all along those lines. And a shocking 30% said that violence was okay as well. So that was a shocking poll that was reported on News Nation yesterday. And Hochul and Van Hollen back Zoran Mamdani as senator slams spineless Democrats. So Trump warns of financial penalties after Hochul endorsed Mamdani. So it looks like Mamdani is getting even more support and all like that. And the whole thing is screwed up. That's what it said in Politico. Farmers in deep red Pennsylvania are struggling to find some uh, workers and all along those lines. And Trump's immigration raids are leaving crops rotting in the field. So, three-time Trump voter hammers president as policies are crippling his farm and all along those lines. So, definitely that is something we've been talking about even here on this network, is how these raids and other things might impact directly some of our primary businesses. And Cash Patel was criticized for his actions and posts during the Charlie Kirk shooting, and knives are out for embattled FBI Director Cash Patel despite his support from Trump. So definitely he's facing criticism and all along those lines. And Rubio is set to visit Qatar after affirming U.S. support for Israel, and Rubio meets Netanyahu to discuss the fallout from Qatar strike and all along those lines. So definitely that's some of the things that are going on in the news. Republicans are to reveal a funding bill and test the Democrats in an effort to prevent a shutdown. So we'll see if this happens or not. And Trump is vowing immigration crackdown after Cuban nationals were charged in a Dallas machete murder. So a lot's going on in the world with immigrants and with other people as well. I'm bringing in Rick Rosner. I've also got Sasha Starr with me as well. I know you've been hearing these stories, got probably comments on a number of them. I do have another.
Yeah. So, all right. So, what's being risked with the Charlie Kirk thing is normalizing hate.
That is true.
So we can deplore and should deplore the assassination of Charlie Kirk. There's room for that. At the same time, Charlie Kirk wasn't always a nice guy in what he had to say. He preached a lot of hate and misogyny and rooted it in Bible quotes. And he's being portrayed by the right as a happy warrior who was happy to debate anybody, any place, but really he debated dumb shit college students on college campuses. Sasha's got his hand up.
Yep, Sasha.
This is there's nothing more to say about this assassination, because United States is a historical country with woven into history. The political assassination, you can go to John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and so on and on and on, and shootings in schools and plazas and so on. So, I mean, it's not really a big deal. Yeah, you can feel sorry for him, for his family, and so on. That's natural. Same as you would feel sorry for a Kennedy family and Martin Luther King family. There is no much difference in it. So this is, to me, I'm sorry about this news, but to me, it's not a big news.
Well, let's talk about some aspects. There was a rally held in London and other cities around the world, headed up by Tommy Robinson, the London one, which got many tens of thousands of protesters in favor of Charlie Kirk in the street. Tommy Robinson is an anti-Muslim activist, a chaos agent, not a good guy. There are plenty of memorials for Charlie Kirk happening. One over the weekend featured Kari Lake attacking colleges for brainwashing Charlie Kirk's assassin, even though that guy went to college, dropped out after less than a semester 4 years ago. And it's not clear what the guy's politics, Tyler Robinson, the assassin's politics are, and he's not cooperating with police. Hold on. One more thing is Charlie Kirk had a net worth of $12 million when he died. Erica Kirk has been forcefully testifying about her grief and anger, and swears that she will push Turning Point, his organization, even further And in fact, 18,000 more people have been added to Charlie Kirk's social followers since his assassination. And when liberals such as myself hear Erica Kirk, obviously, I mean, she suffered a huge freaking tragic loss. At the same time, she's a beauty pageant winner. And she comes from a Southern beauty pageant, I'm sure, evangelical tradition, which means when she talks, she preaches in a way that to libs who aren't familiar with it sounds artificial. So we've got a cultural divide. Also, Charlie GoFundMe's have added $6 million to Charlie Kirk's $12 million fortune since he was killed.
And I've read a couple of interesting articles that were about the left's reaction to Charlie Kirk's assassination, and I don't think that it was the overwhelming way that it was done. But like one nurse, I believe, is suing her hospital and everything because she reacted negatively when a doctor cheered and everything like that, and she was let go of. And there was a social influencer that was also getting pushback from her huge followers. She had a huge following when she was expressing her grief toward Charlie Kirk and his, particularly the loss that his children have and everything like that. And it says that a number of those Kirk followers are replacing the followers that she might have lost when she expressed her desire and support to understand the grief that Charlie Kirk's family is going through. So I'm just wondering, what is our thoughts about social media people getting pushback, or even in some cases their jobs terminated because of
so it doesn't always seem fit. Like, you're an idiot if you had anything good to say about Charlie Kirk's murder, and nobody should be murdered. At the same time, like there's a very funny woman who replaced me at Kimmel. Well, like, right after I was let go, they brought other people in, and this one woman makes videos where she seems to be saying one thing but is saying another, and she was saying you cannot approve of his murder, you cannot joke about his murder. And then all of a sudden, as she's talking, she's saying, I'm not joking about Charlie Kirk's murder, I'm better than you. And then she raises her arms and rises up as if she's Jesus. She goes, she's making a joke about people claiming to be morally superior because they are the thought police with regard to your reaction to the guy's assassination.
Yeah, speaking of thought police and everything like that, the day after tomorrow, we'll probably talk about it on this day as well. I might even try to find somebody associated with it and everything. But, in next year or later, next year, we'll be celebrating the 200th anniversary of the creation of the United States and everything along those lines in 2026 and everything. Yeah. But this year, and actually in 2 days, will be Constitution Day, and that is actually a holiday. And I was watching a gentleman that was frustrated, and he's written a book about it, and he was a friend of one of the I'm thinking Cuomo, one of the people on News Nation. He's actually his boss, is what he said and everything. But he was talking about how they're supposed to be checks and balances, and one of the things that they, particularly constitutionalists, are frustrated by is this notion that the Supreme Court is doing what it's supposed to do. You got a very assertive president and everything like that, but they feel that the Congress is being stagnant and everything like that. So I was wondering you two gentlemen's thoughts on the Constitution.
Okay, so the Congress is the Republicans in Congress are keeping their heads down. They don't want to piss off Trump. The Democrats are in the minority, and some of them are loud, but most of them are also keeping their heads down because in the minority they can't really accomplish anything legislatively. And they're leaning back and waiting for the midterms. They want the Republicans to hang themselves, giving them enough rope. And people are getting pissed at, both sides for, not standing up to nonsense from the executive branch. Here's a fun semi-fact from the last time we had a big birthday party for the U.S. This will be the 250th birthday of the U.S. When we had the 200th anniversary, we got AIDS. But 50 years ago, the longships came to New York Harbor. That is sailing vessels, antique sailing vessels from around the world. Before we had steam engines, we had these ships with giant sails that conducted world trade, and a lot of them still sail the seas historically. And dozens of them came to New York Harbor, and according to some theories, the sailors on those ships from around the world, they got to New York and just started banging other dudes, and that was said to be among the first seeding of AIDS in the United States.
Well, another thing that's going on is that because of the killing and all along those lines, I do want to get back to the Constitution in a minute, but there are people that are considering reinstituting things, and all along those lines, I know here in North Carolina, where I'm at, there are people in the Republican controlled House, because they control the House here as well, and everything, control the entire legislature, are talking about bringing back the death penalty. And even Fox News' Brian Kilmeade says comments about killing mentally ill homeless people was an extremely callous remark. So there is talk about possibly bringing back the death penalty, and even like doing things with mentally ill. And even that host who made the comment apologized for the comment, because he did say it was an extremely callous remark on unhoused people, particularly those that are mentally ill. So do you think that we're going to see more push to bring the death penalty back here, particularly with Charlie Kirk and other things that are going on?
Yes, there's this. It's part of the normalizing of hate. Right. This tough talk that right wingers say you can't be nice, you can't be kumbaya. You've got to recognize the harsh realities of life, and that means crushing your opponents, and when people do bad, throwing them in prison and killing them. And the U.S. already has more people in prison than any other country, more than China, even though China has 4 times our population. We've got the highest percentage of people in prison, and we have the highest actual number, 1.9 million people in prison, and another few 100,000 in jails across the country. And the right wing, a lot of the right wing likes tough talk and tough action.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. Hey, Sasha, what is your take? Just really quickly, we may have more of this conversation later in the week, like the middle when the actual day comes through. But what is your take as one that served in the Soviet Army when you were in the Soviet Union, and is one that has lived in Canada for a number of years now, and everything on the Constitution and the role of the Constitution in the United States, but also the role of the Constitution in other parts of the world in terms of being an inspiration?
It's a difficult question, Mark, because, for example, like in U.S., our Constitution is almost like a Bible, considering its weight and the way the country is being run. On the other hand, it's vulnerable to people like Trump, and I think it may not survive Trump's rule. So I really don't know what to tell much about that. We'll see. Maybe it will survive, but I don't think so.
Well, speaking of surviving and everything, and you mentioned this, and I saw an interesting article not that long ago we've got people even here on our own network that are fascinated by their connection to the royals. One of our founders is fascinated by his connection to the royals and everything. But apparently Trump is very fascinated by the royals, and he gets a rare second UK state visit. So apparently they are planning for every eventuality ahead of his visit. But I was just wondering, because apparently King Charles III is to deploy tiara diplomacy as the UK prepares to welcome Trump for a second state visit. So what is our thoughts on why Trump is so fascinated by the notion of royals and all along those lines? Does he think that he's a king? Does he want to be a king?
Yeah, of course. He said it. He said as much. And during previous visits to the UK, he is kind of pissed off Brits and the royals because he was disrespectful to the Queen. He was like, he walked ahead of her. He didn't know any of the protocols, and but I don't know. Maybe that doesn't matter anymore.
May not matter. And apparently, speaking of violence and all along those lines, coming back to Kirk, apparently the FBI has arrested two, and this is today, after incendiary devices were left under Fox 13 news vehicles. So two men were arrested after allegedly planting the bombs under news vehicles in Utah and everything like that. And I also seen, speaking of Utah, another article on Utah where there was a big gun show that was out there, and a lot of people were basically saying that they were not going to let the Charlie Kirk assassination stop them from their right to hold guns, because apparently everybody in Utah has a gun, or at least every family does, according to what I had read in several articles and everything like that. So what is our thoughts around gun control? Is this going to push more people to want tighter gun controls, or there are just so many people that are like in the NRA and other places that
nobody's mind gets changed? 1/3 of U.S. households are gun-owning households. The average number of guns in a gun-owning household is 8. People who own guns for a number of different reasons. They might have 2 or 3 guns throughout the house. Like my wife and I have started for a long time. We have various weapons near the door in case some lunatic tries to break in. We don't have guns, but we have pipes, and we have a box cutter, and people with guns, they might have a gun by the door. They might have 2 other guns elsewhere. They might have a shotgun for a certain kind of hunting. They might have an AR-15 for fun. There are a bunch of different guns, and if you like guns, you might have a few for different purposes.
That makes sense. And a lot of people that were reading in the various articles that I saw were saying that they were using the guns for hunting. They were using the guns for a number of other purposes, and all along those lines and everything. One of the other things we talked about on this network before, and I know even Jacoby had brought up about the attack on Black and brown people and everything like that, is the impact on our economy. I know we got the economy show coming up next and all along those lines, but there are a number of farms that are being threatened because they can't find enough workers. And I mentioned that in one of the earlier news stories and everything. So what is our take on this? And are we going to see a recession of sorts because a lot of the farm economy isn't going to be tanking because of not having enough people to bring in the crops and all along those lines? So what is your take on
That's not the only reason for a recession. If the tariffs are allowed to stand, they are going to core inflation is already back above 3%, and unemployment is 4.3, which is still low, but it's the highest since 2020. And all that stuff is going to keep on ticking up because we're doing inflationary stuff. And so you got 2 trends. You got angry right-wingers because of Charlie Kirk getting more enthusiastic in their support of right-wing stuff. And then you've got economic trends that are showing that right-wing government is screwing us. So it'll be an interesting and disturbing crash.
It's very interesting to me to figure out if it's already been recognized that all the tariffs are illegal, in view that it's Congress who has a right to put them in the first place, not the president. And it was done that the president did it instead of the Congress. So they are already illegal, and it's waiting now for November Supreme Court's decision. And Supreme Court's decision cannot be any different from it is illegal according to the Constitution. Now, the most curious question, in my opinion, is whatever is illegal means of whatever you gained something by illegal means has to be retributed, has to be returned. How U.S. government will cough up billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. I'd love to see that happen, and how.
So that there is a way. So the deal is Congress has the power to impose tariffs, not the president, unless there's.
But it didn't. Yes, it has.
No. The president imposed the tariffs But the president has that ability in an emergency. And Trump says it's an emergency. And if the Supreme Court is corrupt enough, they'll say, yeah, there was enough of an emergency.
I don't think they will go for this bullshit with emergencies. There was no emergency in the first place.
Well, speaking of the tariffs and all along those lines, there are two democracies that are being hit directly by the tariffs. Some people may say that they are total democracies. Some people may argue that they are dictatorships, depending on your views on these two countries that I'm getting ready to mention and everything. But even Brazil being one of them, India being the other. But Brazil's Lula is pushing back against the tariffs and telling Trump the country's democracy is not on the table. So he's telling Trump that Brazil's democracy is not negotiable. So what is our thoughts around this notion that he's saying that democracy in Brazil and sovereignty in Brazil are not even negotiable things?
So Brazil's a big, messy country, but they did one thing, which is they sentenced Bolsonaro to 27 years in prison for doing the same thing pretty much that Trump did on January 6th. So they've been better at being able to protect their democracy than we have in that one way.
Yeah, I can definitely see
that.
About
tariffs, there is an even more interesting question. Once Supreme Court will, and they have no choice, it's illegal, it's engraved in Constitution. So what Supreme Court say? Okay, we don't care about Constitution, we're going to do our own ruling or so on. So that will be exactly the end of Constitution, what I was talking about 5 minutes ago. But interesting this, Supreme Court, by this decision, everything goes back. U.S. government has to return billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, by the way, already collected. But next issue is that many countries started retaliatory tariffs against U.S. Mm-hmm. And Supreme Court cannot tell other countries, even Canada or any other country in the world, says, oh, you know what, just stop the tariffs, return all the money, and let's start anew. No. Supreme Court doesn't have any jurisdiction over foreign countries. So foreign countries will keep these tariffs and continue most likely to collect even more tariffs, and the U.S. government has to return all the tariffs. Bravo, Donald Trump. Bravo.
Right, here's a fun thing from the Emmys were last night. Now, everybody used to watch these big award shows, but they've lost, 2/3 of their viewing audience in the past 10 years. Because people have other stuff to do. We don't need big event television. Plus, they lost the conservatives. Some people are pissed on Twitter because the Emmys did not hold a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk. And it's weird to expect them to do that in that he wasn't an entertainment personality. But there was an absence of much political commentary at the Emmys. And they did a super fun thing in that direction, which was that the host pledged $100,000 to charity minus $1,000 for every second that people's thank you speeches went over the time limit, which is 45 seconds. So he turned the Emmys into a game show where people were watching to see how long the speeches went, to see how much money would go to charity. And it was pretty fun. It made it very interesting to watch.
Like I said, I didn't catch any of the Emmys. I'm trying to think I was watching one of the football games because I'm a diehard Viking fan, and they got killed in football and everything by the Atlanta Falcons. So I know I was watching that and then watching some other TV. Hey, Jacoby, there were some things that we talked about last week, including in response to the Charlie Kirk shooting and everything like that. And we know that in some cases, Trump tries to pretend to be a friend of HBCUs. And apparently he has today, and the UNCF, United Negro College Fund, is applauding the funding increase. So he's redirecting millions to historically Black colleges and charter schools. Apparently earlier today, the Education Department announced $1.16 billion in new funding amid the controversial MSI grant cut. So I was just wondering your take on this. Is this just another game of a shell game where you kind of like are playing games with the money in order to make it look like you're doing more than you're actually doing? Or what is your take on this effort to redirect millions to the NCCUs and the Shaws of the world and the Howards of the
He's
world.
not redirecting money there. That's planned. It's a show. He's already said he's taking away money from minority schools. This saying that he's not. They're closing the education department. So what are they doing? They're not sending money to HBCUs. They're taking money from HBCUs. So no. This yeah. I mean,
so a shell game.
I don't
basically.
know. I don't when. So the response, if you want to talk about a response, again, no one should die for what they say. No one, what happened to Charlie Kirk is horrible. But there was a pastor over the weekend who actually said it well.
So
You cannot be absolved for the bad that you've done because of the way that you die. So again, we can all have empathy, feel sorry for him, for what happened to him and his family and everything else. But we can also recognize that as soon as that happened, you had HBCUs going lockdown the next day because people were calling in bomb threats. You can understand that there are people who were in Huntington Beach, California, out there by you, Rick, marching the streets, holding up Charlie Kirk signs saying, "White men fight back." This is not just an isolated incident because they were doing that elsewhere as well. So,
around the world with these big
Exactly.
rallies and often led by unsavory people like Tommy Robinson.
And so you have people, his words, I get it. You have fans that want to only look at, oh, well, he said this about God and this about God is great. And, oh, he talked to people. There are a ton of people that talk to people. We can have empathy for what happened to him. But we should not fly the flag half-staff for a man who pushed some very racist things. And people ask, I've been asked, what did he say that was racist? And again, we have to be adult enough to be able to say, again, and I hate that we're here now because people are losing their jobs and getting attacked for saying things about, no, we're just using his words. We're saying the same thing that he said. I mean, people want to say, well, you got to go touch grass. Well, okay. You're getting mad at people for saying his words. Stop that. So one of the things that he said was he gets nervous when he sees a black pilot.
Right.
That within itself is racist. There's no other way to sugarcoat it. Oh, I had a discussion with somebody. Somebody tried to tell me, oh, he's talking about DEI because he wants to make sure that they're qualified. So you're saying that black pilots cannot be qualified? What about white pilots? So it's just an inherently racist statement that we're trying to gloss over and sugarcoat it because we're fans of those individuals and trying to overlook that. No, again, we can be sorry for what happened to him, but we have to recognize the groups that he was speaking to, how those words were taken, because after the Minnesota senator was assassinated in her home with her husband, Trump mocked it. Trump Jr. mocked it. They made jokes about it. But even worse, there weren't people marching in the streets saying white men or white women fight back. So her words were not being used in that way. And she was not speaking to that crowd. She was never. And so we have to look at these things and understand and stop hiding and have these tough conversations.
But we can't understand each other because there are two cultural setups where I listened to Erica Kirk's eulogizing of her husband. And my wife and I listened, and it sounded weird to us because she comes from a Southern beauty pageant evangelical background. I said this earlier, and when she testified, it sounded super histrionic and kind of fake to liberal ears. But to her people, it's how you talk to people, it's how you express your grief. I assume, because I'm not part of that evangelical world, but it seemed like that, right? Am I misguided there?
I mean, I get what you're saying. It's basically you're speaking to the people that you're talking in front of, and that's what she was doing. But we have to understand again the duality that certain sections of our society have to live up under. That's the duality that we're starting to see we're starting to see more of what's being said and how it's being taken. And we need to understand that if we're ever going to turn down the temperature, as people want to say, or try and help people overcome. And I told somebody this the other day. The only way that we can move forward as a society in these situations, we have to look at the people that are actually in pain. The reason why, for example, nobody should celebrate the death of anyone, but we have to find out why do they feel some type of relief because of the pressure that they were under. What was the problem and what were they feeling? So there are a lot of minorities and African Americans that were, I wouldn't say joyous, but they weren't as saddened as or trying to put on. No, they were.
Just really quickly, did you see Joy Reid's post? Because she was trying to figure out the notion of why the white males are so angry when they basically have control of everything. And I mean, do literally everything and all along those lines. But it was a very powerful speech where she was trying to understand the nature of their anger.
But that's the question that a lot of minorities and live up under is, why are you, for example, again, you can go back to what happened with Charlie Kirk. The next day, HBCUs are under threat because of that. HBCUs, black people didn't have anything to do with it, but they were the first ones looked at and attacked. So that should not be in our society.
So right-wing pundits play a double game where they claim to be, just speaking the truth in a happy way. That Charlie Kirk was a happy warrior out there, just friendly, would debate anybody. At the other hand, he's saying some terrible stuff to people who respond to terrible stuff, young, disaffected white males. And then when you bring up the terrible stuff he said, then they say, well, no, you're taking it out of context. If you put it in a larger context, he was just quoting the Bible, and he didn't really mean what he said. It's similar to the Trump game, where Trump sends terrible dog whistles to the people who will respond to that, and then his apologists say, no, he's a funny guy. He's just kidding around. Doesn't mean.
Hold on.
That's the issue that I have, though, Rick, and that's why we got to stop trying to justify and make what they're saying. If it's racist, call it racist. Don't try and make it more palatable and whitewash it. I mean, that's what they're doing when Trump has already said he's going to go through and try and take all these references from slavery and all these other things out, make it less woke. What, you're trying to whitewash it? You're literally trying to take away things that you feel make you uncomfortable. That's history. That is what, if you are comfortable with your history, you don't know your history. There are things in history that are extremely uncomfortable, from the castrations of black men to, sicking dogs on people marching for peace. Stuff like that is our history. We've got to understand that and be able to cope with it and empathize with those that feel this pain. Because if you can't understand my pain, then it's going to be hard for us to move forward and actually build something together.
Yeah, hold on a second. We have Steve. Steve's when he pops in, I try to get him on really quickly. I have to get you, Sasha.
No, Mark, send me a link to Economics Monday. I might join for just a few minutes. I got a couple of flights to actually going to Washington for a few days. I mean, I think this is, for folks, my only update was, what we're hearing on the ground here, just a lot of fear, a lot of people upset, trying to figure out why this is happening. I think part of it is the technology and the divisions that we feel. It's making it easy for people to just speak behind a keyboard, which escalates things. We don't know still the motivations behind this murder, but you shouldn't celebrate when someone dies. And I think the fact that we're here is very sad. We should also be reflective of aware of the fact that we can celebrate a diversity of opinion. I was on PBS this week talking about this issue. How did we get here? And then we have to look at mental health. Why are people so sick that they don't value life? How do we keep our eyes on local governments, maybe funding more police and working with state governments and having a conversation of how we can come together as Americans? And I'll end with this. I'm going to, I forgot to give my updates of what's going on in the world, but I'm still lots of talk about India and tariffs and things like that. But the bottom line is that, like, during 9/11, which we just remembered last week, we saw firefighters going to burning buildings. We saw neighbors helping strangers. And, I think that that's something that we need to think about, that we can be one country, one people, one flag, one nation of many different beliefs. We don't need to hate each other like this. And it's not good for our children. It's not good for our grandchildren. So I really think we need to really reflect, take a pause, and think about the great nation we built. We have a lot of mistakes, a lot of things we can do to get better, but that's where I'd like to see the conversation move forward.
Sasha, you had something you were getting ready to add and everything. I just wanted to bring Steve in real quick because I know he only pops in usually for a minute or two.
Well, yeah, well, I'll be back. I'll be back at 11.
Yeah.
I'd like to mention that neither John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, or Martin Luther King were wearing a life-saving jackets. Kirk did. So Kirk knew that there could be a payback time for him, and therefore he was prepared for that event. So he knew that he was potential martyr, that it's just a question of time when he will be dealt with, and that time happened last week. So he and hopefully his family, everybody else, should have been prepared to that outcome.
Well, it's also modern technology. That our JFK, they didn't have Kevlar back then. I think that recent presidents have Kevlar panels, bulletproof panels, sewn into their jackets. It's maybe one reason that Trump's suits have never fit well, but they fit especially poorly, maybe because they have some bulletproof tech built into them.
Speaking of tech and everything along those lines, hey, Sasha, there's a major company, ByteDance and everything like that creates TikTok, and apparently there's a deal in place that might be announced in the next day or two with TikTok. So are we finally going to have our young people glad that their TikTok has been saved? And not just young people. I mean, I've even been on TikTok, and a number of other people have been as well. But what is our take on this notion of TikTok being rescued by a possible deal with Trump?
As another form of socialism?
I don't know. It was coming to that anyway, and TikTok continued to operate during all that time. So I don't think that young people will see any difference in their lives as a result of this deal.
What were you saying, Jacoby?
It's just another thing where whatever the deal may be, Trump is getting a piece of it, or one of his buddies is getting a piece of it. That's all that is. And honestly, it's another corrupt form, or how our government's being run right now, which is very corrupt. But getting back to the planning ahead thing, I don't think that's really where we should be. I think where we should be, again, is, yes, partially what Steve is talking about, but also we have to be able to be honest and be truthful about what is going on. We keep right now, and it's done in the media regularly, that the Democrats need to calm down, or the Democrat this, or the Democrat that, or we got to get out of that We have to get out of, well, somebody on social media said, and it was a liberal this, it was a liberal that. That's done in the media way too much. That's done all around way too much. We just have to be honest. Right now, somebody who's stroking a lot of this anger and angst, it's not the media that's doing that. It's the man who goes on TV and says, has the opportunity to bring everyone together, but says, hey, the radical left wing did, or just attacking one group of individuals, but ignores the whole or what's actually happening. And that's the man with the biggest megaphone. So until we can honestly be open and honest about that from the start, it makes it hard. Because no matter if Steve preaches peace, I preach peace, Sasha preaches peace, Rick preaches peace, and then Mark goes around and attacks everybody, we're still having a problem with Mark. It's not going to change that way. If I'm yelling at everybody and Sasha and Rick and Mark and Steve are all being super nice, we're still having a problem with me. So we have to be honest to be able to call individuals out. And with the individual with the biggest megaphone right now, they're stroking fear and pushing madness. And that's a problem.
So also the way we communicate is still pretty new. Social media, internet is people are vulnerable to. If you go back 100 years to Nazi Germany, that was at the time public relations and advertising was pretty much brand new. That advertising, in the year 1900 was incredibly lame and simplistic, and just was like, a housewife holding up some soap. By the 30s, it had grown a little bit more sophisticated, and they had new ways of sharing messages, radio, and so Hitler had sophisticated PR techniques that look kind of lame today because it's 100 years later. But back then, people could be fooled and influenced. And this time around, we're surrounded by new ways of communicating, and it's confusing to people. And the people who are sophisticated at like double messaging and dog whistling, have an advantage.
Yeah, also, this is actually pretty interesting. Rick or Mark, I have this in the background. This is something that this is where many African Americans are because of the way things are being portrayed.
So let me make sure I got this right. Conservatives want to lecture liberals about tone and respectability and decency in the aftermath of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The same conservatives who downplayed tragedy after tragedy when the victims were black, brown, queer, or simply Democrats. Let's get into it. When George Floyd was murdered, Republicans did not mourn. Marjorie Taylor Greene called Democrats worshipers of a convicted felon. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't care about that man's family. After George Floyd's death, Texas GOP officials circulated memes calling it a hoax. People like Charlie Kirk literally blamed this man for his own death, even though we watched him get choked out. Blamed it on fentanyl. You had people like Candace Owens making entire documentaries ridiculing this man dying. And y'all want to talk about decency? A Scottsdale, Arizona councilman literally mocked Eric Garner's dying words at an anti-mask rally, wearing a mask, talking about "I can't breathe." Republicans literally mocked this man's dying words, and y'all want to talk about decency? Y'all doing all this tone policing now, but where was y'all when Fox News aired a chart aligning stock market gains with the killings of black men, specifically George Floyd and Michael Brown? New Jersey corrections officers were filmed reenacting Floyd's murder as counter-protest theater. What are we talking about? A Republican state senator in South Dakota posted "All Lives Splatter," joking about running over protesters weeks after a white supremacist killed Heather Heyer with a car in Charlottesville. Imagine telling liberals to be respectful after Kirk when your own party treated black men's last breaths and an anti-racist protester sister's death as punchlines. We can keep going. When Paul Pelosi was nearly beaten to death in his home, Donald Trump Jr. joked about a Halloween costume of underwear and a hammer. Kari Lake laughed on stage about Nancy Pelosi's home security. Conservatives treated an attempted assassination of the speaker's husband like late night comedy material. And y'all whining about how folks are responding to Charlie Kirk? When the FBI foiled a kidnapping plot against Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Trump had a whole rally talking about lock her up just days after. And then he mocked Whitmer for blaming him for radicalizing the people that were trying to kidnap her. Conservatives didn't call for unity. They doubled down. When Puerto Ricans died by the thousands after Hurricane Maria, Donald Trump was shooting paper towels and then claimed that the Puerto Rican death toll was made up by Democrats to make him look bad. We can keep it going. After 49 mostly LGBTQ people were slaughtered at Pulse nightclub, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick tweeted, "A man reaps what he sows." Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Hortman and her husband was assassinated, and Senator John Hoffman and his wife were shot. Conservatives wasn't talking about no damn unity. Senator Mike Lee posted conspiracy bait about the suspect being a Marxist and slapped a wink and a nod tagline on it, tying it to Democratic leaders. We not taking no tone policing lectures from the same crowd that sneered at George Floyd's last breath, that laughed about Paul Pelosi's fractured skull, told Puerto Ricans their deaths didn't count, and could barely muster any empathy when Minnesota Democrats were being assassinated. If you didn't respect tragedy then, you don't get to demand it now. Period.
So let me just talk about Eric Garner for 1 second. This is another guy who was, I think, choked to death, right? Suffocated.
Yep.
His offense was it's illegal to open up a pack of cigarettes and sell single cigarettes to people. That's against the law. Somebody says, give me a cigarette, and somebody says, yeah, give me 50 cents or $1 for this. Can't do that. That was his offense. He was selling single cigarettes. That's why he died.
Mark, I've got to run. Could you email me that link? Because I lost it. I got booted out.
It's in the chat. It's still in the chat. I can put it back in the chat.
Okay, do it because I have to cut this.
Okay, Sasha's got a thing.
Yeah.
Well, this time, the accused killer has been identified. He's in custody.
Yeah.
Okay? So now all puzzle has been resolved. It's just a matter of time whether he'll be given a death penalty or a life sentence. It's a secondary fact, which is maybe interesting to a few people, not to me, for example. So at that point, the issue is done and over with. What else is there to comment?
Well, his motives, because each side is trying to claim. One side is, so there are different degrees of being right wing. There are these groypers, which are there's this whole subculture. I mean, there are tens of millions of hard right wing people in America now, and they have internal disagreements. And now people are trying to figure out whether this guy killed Charlie Kirk for right wing reasons, or because he had a roommate who might be trans, and he killed Charlie Kirk for being anti-trans. So this.
Do you think that there are a lot of people care about it?
Yeah, in the noisy places, in social media, on Twitter, when Trump talks, when Kari Lake talks, there are going to be a number of memorials for Charlie Kirk, and they are going to continue noise.
Well, I think Sasha hits the nail on the head when he asked that last question. Do you think people care about it? I agree with you, Sasha. They don't. The people have already made up their mind. Trump put out his statement of who they were. Kash Patel went and chimed in and said the same thing of who they were. The individuals that listen to Trump do not listen to the investigation. They do not listen to anything else. They've got their marching orders. Hence the reason why those individuals we talked about in Huntington Beach and in other places went out and marched, and they're yelling, white men fight back. Who are they fighting back against? Other white men? Because it was a white man that killed him.
Yep. Yeah, it was a white man.
I don't know. It's a white man kills white man, and
Yep.
so
Well, I mean, that's actually
that,
See you later.
that's the
Exactly.
thing that people forget is that the majority of murders by white men are by white men, even though you would not know that if you listen to certain news reports and everything like that.
If honestly, that's one of, and I hate, again, sad for what happened to Charlie Kirk, and I feel for him. I my heart goes out to he and his family and all that. But that was actually one of the things that he pushed, is that black on black crime was horrible, and that black individuals were going throughout the prisons and they deserved it. I mean, yeah, there were some very, very bad things. So if you even listen to him, yeah,
because he definitely preached that notion that blacks were more prone to crime than other races and everything like that. And he definitely tried to make it seem like the majority of the white victims were by minority criminals, and that is not the case, because the majority of the crimes done to white folks are by fellow white folks and everything like that.
Black people are only 1/8 of the population. You'd expect most of the crime against white people. White people are still more than half of the population is going to be by other white people. Yeah.
You would expect that, but that's not the way it's portrayed in the media, which is the point.
No, because there's a saying, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, and you can always cherry pick some stats to support whatever your point of view is.
Right, exactly. And on that note, we're going to get out of here. I think we're doing Economic Monday, and we've also got Media Monday going on as well. So let's get on out of here.